It's Monday, so that means it's time to update the CDL power rankings. I want to look at the standings real quick first because I didn't do one of these videos last week, so we are doing this based on the last 2 weeks of matches, right? This past weekend and the weekend before, and there has been a lot of movement. I think this might actually be the first power ranking where every single team moved in the rankings, which is pretty crazy, so we're going to get to that, but just looking at this, just to give you a general idea of how teams have been playing in recent weeks. But let's start it off with our number 12 team. Down one spot, I do have LAG. LAG is 0-3 to start the Major 3 qualifier split, and it's just not looking good, right? They've only won 2 maps. They have had some, difficult opponents playing Ravens, playing Surge, and playing Breach. But overall, this team just, they might look a bit better than the previous LAG team, but pretty much every other team, for the most part, looks better or not as bad as they do. So they are down at number 12. I also want you to remember, these are power rankings that adjust week by week. If you watch these when I put these out regularly, you probably know how I do them by now. But for anyone that this is their first time, just remember that this is my rankings based on what happened. It is taking everything into account. And also, what I've noticed is people who get angry in the comments by my rankings tend to not even be mad about where I put their favorite team. They tend to be mad about where I put the teams they don't like. So like people who don't like Optic want me to put them last, right? And they're gonna be angry I have LAG last. People who don't like FaZe, would be mad if I had FaZe first, things like that, which I find pretty interesting. But let's just keep it moving here to the Falcons at number 11, up one spot. The Falcons finally got their first win as a CDL franchise. XNID finally gets his first win in the CDL against Optic Texas this past weekend in a 3-1 victory. They look significantly better at everything, obviously, but especially at HP. I mean, I think they're on like a 4 hardpoint win streak, which is insane to say for an org that hadn't won HPs previously, right? Obviously, completely different roster, but still pretty cool to say. I know some people probably want Optic under them because they just beat them, but well, we're going to talk about Optic in a second. Then coming in at number 10, down one spot, I do have the Minnesota Rocker. This Rocker team is undoubtedly better than they were with Paul X, but the wins are just not coming in the way they'd want, right? They've gone game 5 every single series so far with Kenny finally getting a win. But if you look previously with Paul X, they were on a 6-series losing streak. They hadn't won since February when they had Paul X on the roster. And finally getting that win with Kenny, they do look better, but they're still losing. They got reverse sweeped yesterday by Cloud9. They lost to Optic. They lost to Ravens. They were able to beat the Boston Breach, which is a reasonable victory. But overall, when you're just not getting across the line, you're of course going to be dropping the rankings. Then coming in at number 9, down one spot, I do have Optic Texas. I already know there's the Optic haters typing in the comments saying they think Optic should be lower. And if you think they should be lower, right, I'm not going to argue with you about it that much. Of course, Optic looks pretty bad right now, but they were 2-0 the weekend. They were 2-0 the first week, and they went 0-2 the second week. So they're currently 2-2, sitting in a winner's bracket spot for the major, which is, we can't just forget about these 2 matches here that they won versus Rocker and C9, just because they lost this week to a really good Miami Heretics team and a Falcons team, which they definitely should have won this, right? But Falcons are looking better as well. Optic is definitely looking down bad at the moment, but we can't just ignore other wins just because they lost to Falcons. Falcons have Pred now. They have world champions on their roster. Exid's a good player. The people who really don't like Optic are going to be mad that I have them this high, right at number 9. But I think anybody with an objective standpoint, an unbiased point of view, understands that this is probably right around where Optic should be. But unluckily for Optic, they might continue to fall because they play FaZe next weekend and they might end up in a loser's bracket spot. So we'll be talking about them next week. But keeping it moving here to Cloud9 at number 8, down 3 spots. To C9's credit, they did pull off a reverse sweep versus Minnesota Rocker yesterday at the time I'm recording this on Sunday. I mean, they got 3-0'd in their 2 previous series. They did play Optic and LAT, but Optic, they looked good in that C9 series, I guess, but C9 is just in a kind of a rough spot right now. I feel like this team still, they just feel like every win they get just delays the inevitable roster change that they should probably make. It's usually like Mac or Attach will have a good map or end up winning them a series at some point, which both of them have been pretty underwhelming for the vast part of the last couple months. So this team, to me, just does not look like they're going to qualify for champs, despite Kremp looking like their best player by far, really good at this game, and Civ having some big moments. And then rounding out the right side of the board at number 7, down one spot, I do have the Royal Ravens. Carolina's a tough team to rank, right? Because they're one of those teams, I mean, just look at their schedule, right? They had a bunch of wins previously, and then it's just been like every other for the last, month, basically, for this team, which is pretty crazy. But this split so far, they beat LAG, they lost to FaZe, they beat Rocker, they got reverse swept by Surge. It's just very back and forth. They are 2-2, but obviously the teams they're beating are at the bottom of the board, and the teams they're losing to are at the top. So being at around 6 to 7 for me makes sense for the Ravens. And I'm slotting them in at 7. But I just wanted to give you a quick reminder to check out Agent Picks. It's linked down below. If you like Prize Picks or Underdog, you'll love Agent Picks if it's available in your state, of course. But check them out and use code MAV when you sign up for up to a $100 deposit match and a 3% winnings boost. But as always, like I always say, make sure to gamble responsibly. All right, let's get into our top 6. And at number 6, up 1 spot, I do have the Boston Breach. Boston's another one of those teams where a little bit kind of like I said about Cloud9, sometimes they look impressive, sometimes they look really bad. And I feel like they're just, in the grand scheme of things, I think they should have made a change earlier in this season, and I think their ceiling and their placement would have just been better, setting themselves up long-term for champs in EWC. But this split so far, they 3-0'd Toronto. There's a little bit of an asterisk on this series for me because Toronto clearly was having some insane server issues. At the end of the day, Boston still played well in that series, so the win is the win for them. But, you know, definitely I think would have been at least closer for Ultra and not a 3-0 if they weren't lagging the way they were. But then they lost to the Minnesota Rocker in a Game 5, Round 11, and then they 3-1'd LAG, who, like I said, is the worst team in the game. I'm moving Boston up, obviously, because I do think they deserve it based on the performances they've shown. I'm just someone who hasn't been high on Boston all year, and people have told me that I should maybe be higher on them. I think Snoopy's really, really good, but the other 3 just feel super hit or miss for me. Now at number 5, our highest risers, I do have the Miami Heretics up 5 spots into that position. After bringing in Super, the Miami Heretics look really, really good, right? They're 3-0 right now, sitting at the number 1 seed, heading into Major 3 right now, so they do have a tough schedule, just to show you real quick. They play Ultra and Rocker remaining, so Ultra should be an interesting one, but I feel like they're going to end at least 4-1, if not 5-0, if they beat Toronto. But they beat Vegas Falcons, they beat Optic Texas, and they beat the reigning back-to-back-to-back LAN champions, Atlanta FaZe. Again, we know it's online, things like that, but the Heretics are just playing really well. The pacing that Super brings to this team, based on what we were seeing previously with Lucky, is amazing for Black Ops 6. Him and Rencor were godlike this past weekend. And I'm really, really impressed with this Miami Heretics team. People said I was low on them, and I clearly was because they look really good, and I was definitely too low on them, so I'm eating my words there, but they're a fun team to watch with Super on the roster, and I'm really interested to see how they're going to look at Major 3 on LAN. Now we get into our top 4. I'm sure this is going to be another point of contention for some people, so bear with me, hear what I have to say, and then you could let me know your feedback in the comments. But at number 4, down 2 spots, I do have the Vancouver Surge. To their credit, the Surge are 3-1 this split. So if you did want to keep them up, you could. But to me, as you're going to see, it's a case of who they lost to, which obviously was a 3-0 to the LA Onliners themselves. Love those guys, right? Shout out to LAT. But they did 3-0 Falcons, 3-0 Gorilla Mates, and reverse sweep Ravens this past weekend. So this team still looks really good to me. Like, I think they're still undoubtedly top 4. But like we're going to see, they got 3-0'd by another top 4 team, which to me just, with how dominant that was, I had to drop them below them. And obviously that means up 1 spot at number 3, I do have LAT. The Thieves are 2-1 right now, 3-0 versus Surge, like I said, 3-0 versus Cloud9, and then lost in a Game 5 versus the Toronto Ultra yesterday. Toronto continues to have these guys' number. We're actually going to talk about Toronto more in a second. I have a pretty interesting stat they talked about on the broadcast, but LAT overall, I think they look really good. Ultra's been giving them some trouble. I mean, recently, like you see, like 2 of their last 4 matches, they lost to the Ultra, and 2 of their last 5 matches, they 3-0'd C9, which is interesting how that worked out like that with the major and then the online qualifiers. But we know how good this LAT team can be when they're playing at the top of their game. And really for them, it's just going to be whether they could do it on LAN. Then coming in at number 2, down 1 spot, I do have Atlanta FaZe. Again, I feel like I always have to say this when we talk about FaZe being dropped from the 1 spot. This is not like a prediction as to what I think is going to be at the LAN. I feel like FaZe is guaranteed going to be a top 2 spot, get in the grand finals at Major 3. We know FaZe is not trying as hard or as good online. It's not the end of the world if you're top 2, bro. That's still a really great spot to be. So if there's FaZe fans that are angry about that, I'm sorry, but it's a power ranking, right? It adjusts every single week, but they lost to the Toronto Ultra, they 3-1 Ravens, and then they lost to the Miami Heretics this week. So they are 1-2 right now. I do believe they should have that winner's bracket spot, though, playing Falcons and Optic. I feel like those should be wins for FaZe to end the split 3-2, but they still look really good. Simp has just been a bit underwhelming this stage. I don't think he's gone positive in any of their series. KD, of course, isn't everything, but Celium still looks godlike. I think Simp has just taken a bit of a step back recently, which has been part of the reason their form's been a little worse. And of course, last but not least, at number 1, up 2 spots, I have the Toronto Ultra. Toronto so far this stage has been good, beating FaZe, beating Thieves, 3-0 to Breach, but like we said, kind of a weird series with the lag issues they were having and the server issues. This team looks good. That stat I was telling you about, they are 2-1 versus Thieves and FaZe this season. They're probably the only team to have a positive record versus those guys, right? So to be positive on the season record-wise versus Thieves and FaZe, two super teams, right, is pretty insane to say for the Toronto Ultra. They're just hitting form, man. The CleanX was insane yesterday. I actually want to pull up his stats just to show you. Yesterday versus LAT, this guy turned into God himself on the map, bro. Literally God himself. He went plus 13, which doesn't seem too crazy. 121 kills, bro. 121 kills. He was slamming yesterday. Going absolutely crazy. I mean, 31 map 1, 33 map 3, 40 map 4, and then 11 in the first S&D and 6 in the last S&D, but they won it anyway. CleanX just looking godlike, and the Toronto Ultra are just hitting form in the middle part of the season, so I want to see what they look like at Major 3. But those are going to be the power rankings after the first 2 weeks of Major 3 qualifiers. Let me know what you think about this. I'm sure there's going to be people that think Optics should be lower. I think that's going to be the biggest one. Ultimately, they're 2-2 right now. If you look at the last 2 weeks, it could be a lot worse, right? They could be under 500. They could be winless like some teams right now, or I guess like one team, LAG, my bad, Gentlemates fans. But let me know what you think about this. Sub to the channel. We're on the 10K subs. I appreciate the support recently, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.